Title: How Vikings Controlled Entire. Listen to the names. A litany of edges. Amlib Konung, Ivar, Sitriuk. Sea kings who never needed to march through forests with pack trains and banners to make a province turn its face their way. They brokered marriages that braided Norse and Gaelic bloodlines. They promised to carry one family's raiding party to a rival's fields, while vowing to leave a different coastline untouched. The same man could sell protection and danger in the same breath. Their garrisons were small, their halls crowded with goods and gossip, and their most terrible weapon was the clock. If you broke your word in October, you had to live with the winter, knowing open boats could slide along your frozen bay any dawn. Farther east, the quiet empire becomes vast. Follow the black ribbon of the Dnieper where the trees stand close and the river mutters under ice. A team of men in furs and mail pass a sledge over a portage, shoulders bent, teeth smoking in the cold. These are the Varangians, called Rus by the people they tax and guide. They do not plant garrisons in every village, nor carve their names into hills. They ride a cycle called Polyudi, the winter tribute round. They arrive with a few dozen hard men, not a massed army, and they sit by a fire while elders bring furs and wax and slaves to the snow. If a chief balks, a boat burns. He knows the rules by spring. It seems too thin to hold, but look at what pads the bones. Treaties with the Byzantine Empire that turn violence into tariff. Rights to trade in Constantinople's markets on specified days. Whole booms of fur and silver fed by Islamic dirham coins that jingle like rain when poured into a chest. Scattered in Scandinavia's graves are those same coins, each one a rumor-made metal that somewhere east, beyond forests and steppes, a handshake had been made and kept. The Varangian Drzina, the prince's retinue, numbered in the hundreds, not tens of thousands. They controlled a corridor that ran for 1,000 miles by ensuring no one moved along it without owing them a favor, a hostage, or a cut. Even in their homelands, the pattern shows. Halls at Ledri, Tiso, and Gamla Uppsala did not sap their neighbors' strength by billeting soldiers. They drew it in with gifts and feasts and the public burning of wealth to prove they could afford to give. A king's best weapon was not a fort, but a memory his rivals wanted to belong to. You could join his ring-giving and leave with a promise that mattered more for being spoken in front of everyone who could shame you if you broke it. A court scald could float those promises further than troops could march, sweetening compliance with the honey of praise. There is a word that keeps being muttered in the documents their enemies wrote. Danegeld, pay the Dane. It sounds like surrender. It was sometimes. It was also a contract. But, come back on my terms. A bishop in London could count out shillings into a bag because he had studied the oaths exact people had taken, and he had read last year's treaty. What is a state if not the ability to make strangers follow a rule you made? The Vikings wield that capacity from shore to shore. Their advantage was honesty of a brutal kind. You knew what got you killed and what got you rich. They understood choke points with a predator's instinct. Control the mouth of the Seine, and you control Paris without ever stepping into its streets. That is what Rollo grasped when he met Charles the Simple and accepted a wedding and a new name instead of a final battle. Normandy was not carved out by an army trampling furrows. It was drawn with a pen made of threats. The Duke's Taub was simple and impossible. Keep the other Vikings out and the river open. He did it with a chain of wooden towers, a cadre of kinsmen on fast horses, and an understanding with the towns that if a tax was collected, a market guaranteed, and Christian tithes acknowledged, the sails on the horizon would remain scenery, not disaster. From that pact grew one of Europe's hardest new polities, born from the art of saying this and no more at a bend in a river. All of it looks improvisational, and in a sense it was, but there were tools, almost ceremonial in their repetition. The scale, and the precise weights carried in little purses. The oath ring, rubbed smooth by palms, kissed by chieftains who tied themselves to the laws they were making other men obey. The hostage, rarely spoken about in the sagas with pride, because he was too essential to be bragged about. A person turned into collateral, and then often into a bridge. The winter camp, a temporary city that could print rules and then melt back into the travel routes it guarded. The story, carefully curated, and sometimes exaggerated, that made an entire coastline choose to comply before a single ship appeared on the tide. There is a trick to lasting power, and they knew it. If you can make your enemy pay you for the right to obey you, you don't need soldiers. If you can make your neighbor believe that paying you keeps worse wolves from his door, you have built his calendar for him. If you can place your tables where caravans end and sailings begin, your law writes itself with other people's hands. This is the question that will follow us into the next chapter. How exactly did a group of men with perhaps a few dozen ships walk into foreign harbors and leave as governments? What words were spoken on that first day to turn a raid into a regime? We will stand at a muddy fording place as a jarl lifts an oath ring and a town answers with the rattle of spears. We will watch a hostage's name entered into a ledger and see why that line of ink was more dangerous than any sword. And we will open a purse the size of a child's fist and find in the gleam of little silver weights the quiet secret by which Vikings ruled without armies at all. Dawn presses like a thumb on the marsh, and the gate of Hedeby opens with a groan. No fanfare, just a man with a folding scale and a set of stamped weights. The caravan stops without being told. Traders stitch their mouths shut and tighten their grips on reins, because this is the moment that decides whether you pass into the market or sleep with your cargo in the wet grass. There are no ranks of spears here, only a rhythm. The scale pans kiss the cold. A coin is pecked with a knife, its silver tested on a stone. The weight winks in the gray light, and everyone's heart keeps time with the balance. When the pans rest level, a nod replaces a trumpet, and the whole day flows. On the map, Hedeby looks like a dot. In practice, it is a lock in a canal, clamped between seas. Behind it runs the Danevirk, soil heaped into a wall so long it redraws the math of the peninsula. A timber gatehouse and a man with a ledger bar entry to the narrow neck between the Baltic and the North Sea. If you want to slide goods the short way instead of sailing the long way around winds that will unbuild you, you submit. A toll is not an army, but it makes armies unnecessary. It turns geography into revenue and hesitation into habit. Once you accept a scale here, you accept it everywhere it appears with the same marks. Follow that scale through graves. Archaeologists keep finding them folded like birds, tucked beside knives and whetstones and beads. Tiny bronze weights shaped like seeds, stamped with little circles, waiting to be planted wherever the owner lands. A merchant, a raider, a chieftain's nephew. Whoever carries a scale carries authority. He can turn anything into money and money into agreement. The units whisper across language. An oar, a mark, a dirham's weight. A scoop of silver hack cut from an armband has the same rightness in York as in Kiev, in Dublin as in Sigtuna, because the weights say so, and the oath ring will swear to it. The oath ring is not just an object. It is a stage. At a thingstead, the chieftain lays his hand on the band of metal that lives at the high seat, and everyone watches whether he presses or merely touches. A promise is enacted with a visible ritual. The spear butt tapped on the ground, blades lifted in a silent forest called a wapentake, weapon taking. Because assent is measured not in syllables, but in drawn steel, raised and lowered together. A law is read out and weighed the way silver is weighed, by witness and tool. If you swear on the ring and fold the scale, you have married law to measurement. The next tribute round needs no soldiers if the last one looked like this. You can hear that legal rhythm in places that used to be camps and then were not. Torksey winters a fleet, then spring arrives and with it, stalls, ale, women selling cloth, men from inland with carts of salted meat. You can't hold a field with a ship, but you can hold a market with a reputation. Word moves faster than a sail. A place that lets people trade safely becomes a place people return to. And returning is where control lives. Once, a fort was a spike and a threat. Now it's a ledger and a calendar, and the spike stays buried until someone tries to stip a line. Across the Irish Sea, the water looks smooth, but behaves like a street with corners. Dublin's quays hear 4 languages at once. A hostage arrives, soft-handed and well-dressed. A king's nephew who will summer across the water to learn to speak someone else's favor. He is not a prisoner the way a chain says prisoner. He is collateral. He attends feasts, hears poems about boats as straight as blades, learns how to smile in the right order. If his uncle breaks a promise, this boy will eat grisly food and listen to grisly music. If the promise is kept, he will go home with a wife or a sword with a name. Hostages as guests is a way to hold a field you can't see from your hall. The fear of harming him works both directions. Love does the work fear can't finish. Under sea kings, Amlib Ivar Sitriuk, the horizon is a ledger's margin. Raids for hire pay in silver, but marriages pay in nephews and sisters, in the way your name settles into a new mouth. Tribute and fosterage combine to make a mesh across islands where a storm can shuffle everything. If a monastery pays for iron and safety, it also buys entry into a story. These men are firm, quick to punish thieves, strict at the scale. The rule is portable because it is reputational. Ships do not enforce it. People do, by choosing where to sell and where to stay the winter. Eastward, the corridors don't run. They drip step by step, boat hauled over log, log set down on mud, mud stuck to bare feet, and then washed away in a river that will freeze if you delay. Varangians travel with retinues small enough to eat, but large enough to be seen from a curve of bank. They make the Polyuti, the tribute round, to lakeside villages that have already heard last year's terms. Fire is a rumor that needn't be lit. Silver is a song that always has a second verse. The Byzantines, professional diplomats in a city made from rules, write down the transformation in treaties. If they come armed, bar them. If they come as traders, issue stamped tablets, assign them a gate, weigh their goods, tax them, house them for a set number of days, forbid them to buy certain materials in certain quantities. A threat is turned into a tariff, a raid into a receipt. The dirhams from the Islamic world, bright with lines most northerners can't read, pour north in answer, chopped and tested and counted into piles that mean, we will meet again next spring. Back at halls like Lejra, Tiso, and Gamla Uppsala, the logic of feasts looks like waste to a stranger, and like infrastructure to an insider. Oxen roasted whole are not food, but glue. Scalds stitch reputation so tight you can walk on it. Who you praise is who you bind. The hall is a bank that pays interest in jewelry and stories, in seats at the high bench. The chieftain gives rings. In return, he gets men who will carry his scale to the edge of the map and behave as if he is watching. He is watching, through oaths and hostages and the way gifts return themselves. Then there is the time a town says no, it will not pay the gaffel, it will pay itself instead, keeping one season silver and hoping to break the pattern. At first nothing happens. The river remains indifferent. The weir keeps catching salmon. On the fourth night, strangers' fires prick the ridge. The fishermen go out and do not come in. In the morning the gatehouse stands open, not broken but argumented with. A few men with bad tempers and short spears explain very precisely how much the default has already cost, and what it will cost next time. They do not need to kill anyone to make the numbers speak. Afterwards, people talk about the time the town escaped a sack by paying a fee. But the truth is, the sack was never the point. The demonstration was. The gap between compliance and calamity is kept narrow and well lit for all to see, and the scale sits in the middle, serene. England learns this strange calm with coin. Danegeld sounds like a wound, but it behaves like a contract. A sum is set by shires, tallied by reeves, paid in pieces clicked from silver bracelets, and crucially, accepted as adequate by men who could have asked for more by stealing. When Knut later builds a more formal revenue machine, he is not inventing a king's will. He is taking advantage of a population already trained to pay predictable silver to avoid unpredictable visits. The Danelaw's ledger turns out to write in both directions. Rollo on the Seine is the same solution in a sharper suit. He pins his oath to a river with stone and timber and hands it to the Frankish king to countersign. This and no more. The settlements are set like stitches along the banks, and the needle is law. Normans become knights in Latin, but their first language is still water and oath. A county can be summoned on words and custom, instead of banners, if the river knows who is owed what at Rouen. The genius is not ferocity. It is coordination made flesh. What begins to look like peace is really habit harnessed to memory. The weights sit in pouches with the same constellation of dents. The oath ring smells of hands, summer after summer. The runestone down the road says who kept terms and who went east and did not come back. Even the dirhams carry their cuts like scratches on a doorframe, proof that someone tested them and passed them through. Over time, the apparatus outlives the men who carried it. Routes calcify. Families who were once sea kings become respectable. But the pressure never vanishes. It hides in agreed measurements and repeated gestures. And when it fails interestingly. Think of St. Brice's Day, when an English king tries to cut the Vikings out of the story by murdering those inside it. The response is not negotiation. It is the reappearance of ships with a different tempo. Compliance is a dance, and you may not step away without the music changing. The lesson lands and lingers. It is cheaper to keep time than to stomp off the floor. That is why the small things matter. A folding scale is a firearm in a world of smoke signals. A wax tablet means more than a spear. A boy eating foreign bread at a long table is both a hostage and a promise operating at once. A scald's stanza kills and creates reputations faster than an arrow. And a mint die at York, turning out coins that ring the same every week, makes a geography out of trust. Armies can take a town. This kit can make a town take you and want to keep you because you made markets function and kept the toll predictable. So how does it start? Not with conquest, not really. It starts in the first 5 minutes on a shore or under a gate, in the texture of words. Not just what is offered, but how. The negotiator's body language, the visible unloading of spears onto a boat, the placing of the scale on a cloth instead of on bare wood, the reaching for the oath ring after the terms have been spoken, but before they have been repeated back. The grammar of deal-making is as precise as a ritual. Mess it up, and you have a fight. Perform it well, and you have a tax base. The Vikings were fluent in this grammar, which is where we go next. Past the map and the macroscope, into the handshake itself, into the moment a winter camp slides into a market town, because someone said the right words to the right people in the right order, and then handed over collateral that meant something. Into the choreography of the oath ring and the counting of silver, and the deliberate pecking of coin to show good faith. The story only works because people tell it again while looking each other in the face. Listen, the river is quiet. The gate is open. A stranger steps forward and lays a small bronze weight beside a piece of hacked silver. Somewhere behind him, a boy who is not a prisoner lifts a cup at a table where he is not a guest. Between them, a band of metal waits, cool and indifferent, ready to take the print of a warm hand. In the next chapter, we will put our ear to that moment and hear exactly how rule begins without an army. One word, one gesture, one measured clink at a time.